Hello, everyone. We have Anshuman with us today. He's the co-founder of Scalar, and he's previously worked with Mark Zuckerberg directly in Facebook. And today we are going to be discussing about is doing masters from US the right call? Any initial thoughts on Anshuman? And welcome. Thank you so much for taking this session with us.
Thank you so much, Mohit, for hosting me. Very glad to be here. And also, I mean, this is a topic very close to my heart. I have seen and counseled so many people now on the to do the masters or not to do the masters topic that I now have a lot of data points to also share. So I hope like as we discuss, this session would be very useful to you. All right, Mohit, over to you. Let
Cool.
me know.
Yeah. So, any initial thoughts on whether doing masters is the right call? Maybe talk about the typical reasons that you think. You must have spoken to multiple people. What are the typical thoughts that people echo while they are communicating about this topic?
Right. So I encountered across. I encountered majorly two kinds of people. High level two buckets. One, people who want to do masters in the US because they aspire to get a job in the US. So masters then becomes a gateway to get into a job in the US. Or the second persona is people who are very interested in doing research, and there's certain kind of research, there's certain kind of work that is happening with certain universities, and therefore they want to go and do research there. I would address both one by one. If, let's say, you belong to the first category, you actually aspire to settle down in the United States, and therefore you are wondering whether doing masters makes sense or not. The answer comes as, there's a flow chart to that answer. So masters is one way of going and like settling down in the US, but there are a bunch of risks associated with it. There is a very high cost associated to it. There are other paths as well. So I'll maybe break it down into personas, and I would talk about like whether it makes sense or not. Persona one, let's say you're somebody who hasn't graduated from a great college. So the college in India at least doesn't have a great brand name. And today you work with an employer that's also not a great concentration of talent. Right? So if you come with that combination, one of the bets is, hey, look, if I go and do a master's in the US, that helps me reset. And a lot of companies would then consider me for interviews in the Silicon Valley or in other parts of US, and therefore I would be able to get a job there. That thought process makes sense. However, just like one pointer there, that your college brand or employer brand can easily be reset by another employer as well. For example, imagine your colleague works hard, prepares, and is somehow able to get to a well-known employer that has high concentration of talent. For example, let's say a Microsoft or Adobe or Amazon or Google. If they're able to get there, then that becomes the brand identity. Nobody would ever ask you what college you came from. People wouldn't care, actually, to be honest. And in that case, if that company has a office in the US, a headquarters in the US, it is possible for you to create a path for yourself where you get taken internal transfer to the United States. That helps you, if you are able to do that, that helps you save on the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means that for a period of time when you're doing the masters or preparing for masters, you won't be working, and therefore you won't be earning. So in that period, the money that you lose by not earning, that you save on. Plus, doing masters in the US is reasonably expensive. The average cost, including the fees, including the hostel and stay fees, plus including your expenses, would somewhere be around $80,000 to $100,000 for doing the masters, unless you are in very heavy scholarship. And if that is the case, that's a decently high amount. That's probably how much a lot of good paid software engineers make in a year. In India, it will take you a lot of time to make that money, right? So the opportunity cost of doing masters from US is very high, and therefore if you actually have a path, if you can create a path for yourself where you are able to get to great companies and therefore offset or reset your brand, and then move to the US from there, that might be a better option if you're able to do it. If not, then obviously masters is always on the table. The second path, or the second category of people that I usually talk to is people who already are working at decent employers, right? Like, for example, some time back I talked to somebody who was working at Target. Target is also a US based company, fairly high concentration of talent. If you belong to that persona, if you're thinking about masters, there I would ask you to seriously reconsider, if you want to do masters only for the reason of getting a job in the US. I would ask you to seriously reconsider maybe getting into an Amazon or a Microsoft or an Adobe kind of company, and then seeking an internal transfer might be an easier route for you, instead of actually having to go through the hoops. In fact, or even getting into the likes of Facebook or Twitter in Europe or London, and then going from there to US might be an easier path. Masters is might or might not be worth it, depending on like where you are with your personal finances. So those are the two people that I talk to in the first category. The second persona is people who want to go to do masters because they are very, very keen on research. There also, it is very important to understand that masters is of two kinds. There is a MS by course and MS by research. If you're keen on research, maybe look for colleges that offer MS by research, because there is a definitive path to actually contribute to research papers, uh, transition over to a PhD if at all that makes sense, and then obviously like jobs, etc. If post all of this. But if your keen interest is in research, I completely agree that there's a lot of really good work happening in companies in the US, sorry, in universities in the US, and therefore it might make sense to do that. But do make sure that you're then going for what you want. You're going for MS by research and not MS by course. Not all universities offer MS by research. So those are my initial thoughts, Mohit. I'm happy to dig deeper into into the
Sure.
thesis and then
Sure. So you spoke about masters by research. Any recommendations on Ivy League colleges or non-Ivy League colleges, specifically for masters? Should people only choose Ivy League colleges, or are there any non-top tier kind of colleges that people can look for?
Right, so a lot of cutting edge research work actually happens mostly at Ivy League colleges. Um, and to be honest, just like in India, you have tier 2 and tier 3 universities, US also has the same. Not all universities are great. Not all universities are doing great work and have great faculty. Um, for example, there is a video on YouTube on Trump University. If you find that, please go and watch. You'll understand that there is a similar ecosystem there as well. So I would say like if you want to do research, maybe go to places where there is high concentration of people like you who are also equally keen on research, and there is actually the right facilities and the right amount of problem statements that those universities are solving. Mostly Ivy League colleges are there. There are other colleges where there is very high concentration of Indians. However, I mean, again, they might not have a very great research program. Those are mostly course programs that help you transition into a great job within the US. I
So
won't
I'll
name
take
one.
one. Okay, okay, no issues. We'll take one audience question which seems relevant. So he's getting a scholarship at an average school in US, and
Right.
assuming that the living experience are covered by part time, should he go for masters or should he not?
Right, right. Look, I mean, if you're getting in an average school in the US, again, the first question which I would ask is that is not the only path. There are two paths to compare. So just do a pros and cons analysis on whether it makes sense to spend, let's say, next 6 months, 9 months, preparing for jobs and being able to get into one of the kind of companies which can offer you that path. If let's say you decide, hey, look, I mean, maybe that is a low confidence path for me, I want to take the higher confidence path, which is getting into an average school of US. There you should just I mean, scholarship or not, maybe just compute what is the cost of doing that scholarship, sorry, cost of doing that masters. Cost of doing the masters is not only the cost of your masters and the living expense, it is also the money you are losing out because you're not working during this period. If then it makes sense, sure, go. I mean, again, the choice is very personal. The decision varies from person to person, depends on your financial condition as well. um, If you, for example, if you don't come from a very well-to-do family financially, I wouldn't advise to do that, because the risk is, if you go do a master's and let's say you're not able to figure out a job there, then you'll have to come back to India. I mean, the visa post your master's lasts for a few months in which you have to figure out a job. If you don't, then you have to come back to India. And if you come back to India with that huge loan, it will take you a lot of time to pay back that loan with an Indian job, because currencies are different, right? Here you earn in INR, there you earn in USD. So very personal decision. I would say, like, just maybe create an Excel sheet with pros and cons chart. You have two options. One is a shorter path of maybe getting to a great company and then seeking internal transfer there, or the other is going and doing a master's. What are the cost implications? What is time implication? And then what are the risks involved? You compare that side by side, and then you take a decision.
So you spoke about visa, right? Like visa, you'll if you don't land a job, you'll basically have to
Right.
come back to India. What are the typical visas that Indian can get to be able to work in the US?
Right. Actually, that's a very important question, because this is where most people are not very informed. So, following are the kinds of visas. I mean, the one visa that gets talked about very frequently in news as well is the H-1B visa. H-1B visa is when a company directly hires a company in the US directly hires from outside of US and hires the employee for US. In that case, the employee or the person is supposed to get an H-1B visa. H-1B visa has a quota. So every year, the government has mandated that there cannot be more than 85,000 H-1B visas that can be rolled out. And however, the number of applications for an H-1B visa are very high. For example, in 2016 or 2015, that number was close to about 4 lakhs. So your probability of getting an H-1B visa after having filled all documentation, after having filled the fees, etc., is only 20%. It's a once a year process. Either you get visa that year or you don't. So that means if you 80% chance, you might not get a visa that year, and then you'll have to wait for the next year. You cannot apply for the visa unless you already have an offer from a company in the US. Now, because the probabilities are so low, companies have slowly stopped hiring directly from outside of US because H-1B visa, the probability is very low. Imagine I'm a company, I hire 10 people from outside of the US, only 2 people end up joining because only 2 ended up getting visa. That's a very, very bad situation for me, for my planning, especially also, like, visas don't get issued immediately. It takes about a 6-month period to actually roll out the visa. So that's one. The second is called L1 visa. L1 visa is, let's say I'm already working at a company that has its headquarters in the US. And then the company actually transfers me internally to their US office. In that case, there is no limit, and that visa is fairly easy to get. Almost zero rejections, unless there is a big flag that, like, let's say you have worked on nuclear science in the past, then you get flagged as or blacklisted. Unless that happens, you should be able to get L1 visa. And in that case, the one restriction, however, is that if, let's say, you're working at Amazon and you take a transfer to Amazon US, you can't change employers. You have to stick with Amazon. Amazon, however, the next year after, once you get transferred, they would apply for H-1B visa on your behalf, just to make sure that when you are resident in US, they get you on H-1B. When you do get an H-1B, then you can change jobs. The third type of visa is what is called as J1 or F1 visa. F1, I think F1 is visa, which is what you get post completing a master's from the US. If you complete a master's from the US, then you actually have permission to work on that visa for a year or two. The exact duration, whether it's 1 year or 2 year, I'm not completely sure on, because that keeps changing. But that allows you to work in the US with an employer for a year or two, and then the employer on your behalf applies for an H-1B. If you get that, then you get to stay in US. If you don't get that, then unfortunately you'll have to come back. The fourth visa, which is actually very hard to get and is probably the best kind of visa, is called O1 visa. O1 visa is for extraordinary people in their field. So very, very hard to get. However, if you get that, then there are almost zero restrictions on you. I mean, the country does everything they can to get you in the country, right? So A lot of people who are entrepreneurs or people who have done great things in their field, it's easy for them to get an O1 visa. And that's the best category of visa, but very, very rare for people to get. Just one final point there. In case you're married, then your wife can also work in the US if you are on L1 visa or O1 visa. For H1B or F1 or J1, I mean, your wife or your spouse cannot, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say wife, your spouse cannot work in the US. I said wife because I was considering me in that situation. I didn't mean to be sexist. I'm very sorry.
Yeah. One quick point. So in H1, wife cannot, the spouse cannot work. But I think if you apply for a green card, in that case, the spouse can typically work, irrespective whether you are on H1B or L1.
Correct.
Cool.
Correct.
So I think there are two ways, right, that you spoke about. I'll just summarize that either you get an internal transfer working in India, maybe work in a company which has headquarters in US, and then you can move to US. The other way is you can probably join somewhere else apart from US, because US has a H1B which has a great, which has very less probability of getting that visa. So are there any other options outside of US and outside of India as well, where people can directly apply and work there?
Right. So there are a bunch of other countries where the laws of immigration are far easier as compared to US. For example, getting a job in most EU countries, like for example, Amsterdam is trying to become this hub for startups. So therefore, they are very immigration friendly. Or Canada is more friendly than US when it comes to jobs. Or let's say Singapore is again more friendly if you have some experience. If you have more than 2 years of experience, it's almost a cakewalk for you to get a working visa for Singapore. So there are a bunch of these countries where you can actually go and get a working visa for. And if the company that you're working for has presence in the US, again, it's easy for you to then take an internal transfer to the US if your actual goal is to eventually get to the US. There are, again, certain regions which are less explored. For example, Australia. Australia has Atlassian. Canada has offices of Facebook, Google, etc. It is possible to actually get to those countries as well. They are, again, far more immigration friendly as compared to the US right now. And there again, like you can take an internal transfer.
What about the salaries? Is it comparable to I'm assuming it will be greater than India, but would it be at par with what you can earn in US?
Right. So actually, I think in terms of pay scale, one of the key differentiators amongst regions is like there is a very high variance in the tax rates. Amsterdam has a separate policy to actually give some tax rebate to immigrants. But if you look at most other EU nations, the tax rates are close to 50, 55%, 58%. So therefore, I mean, one is a big portion of what you earn sort of goes away in the taxes. That also has a bunch of benefits as well. For example, education and healthcare is free in most EU nations. That being said, I mean, if I just compare the pay scale, India is actually very different country because there is a big variance in pay scale within companies in India. For example, to a fresh grad, a service company would pay anywhere from 2 to 3.5 lakhs per annum. Whereas like a very high paying product company might even pay 35 lakhs per annum. So there's a 10x gap in the pay scale itself at just the starting level. And that sort of grows as the levels grow as well. So therefore, it's very hard to compare apple to apple, salaries of India versus salaries of outside. But I can give you maybe certain benchmarks. For example, a typical job in Germany, typical software engineering job in Germany at experience level of maybe 2, 3, 4 years pays about 50,000 euros or so, which in Indian currency, if you just do direct conversion, comes out to about 40 lakh. However, I mean, that is not the same as 40 lakh in India because the living expenses would be much, much higher. For example, if you have to take a apartment in India, which is 1 BHK or 2 BHK, that apartment would be probably 20,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees. In the equivalent of that in Germany would be 80,000 rupees or 90,000 rupees. So as you can see, the expenses are far higher, and therefore the actual worth of the same money is different. In general, what I have noticed is if you're a good engineer, if you're a really, really good engineer, then from a pay scale standpoint, it doesn't make sense to actually move to EU countries. Your value of what you're earning would probably be higher as long as you're working with the right companies in India. Very similar thing for Singapore and Australia and other regions as well. US is slightly different. If you, however, I mean, let's say you're currently working in service companies where the pay scale is significantly lower. As I said, like India is not one size fits all. If you're in service companies, there, if you are able to transition into a job in Europe, there you'll see a significant upside in the earning potential that you have.
All right. So coming to the, let's address the elephant in the room. How to apply for companies outside India? What are the paths apart from masters that we can take to, be at those companies?
Right. So as with anything, I mean, there is a direct path and there is an indirect path. Indirect path is where, let's say the company that you're working for could be a service company. You get an on-site opportunity in a country outside of India. Or if you're in a product company, let's say that company actually has a presence in other places as well, that you can actually ask your company, if the company is open, to give you an internal transfer. For example, Amazon has offices in a lot of parts of Poland, Germany. You can ask for an internal transfer there. They also have an office in London. You can ask for an internal transfer there if there are teams there that match and they're okay taking you. So one is internal transfer. Now, internal transfer, different companies have different policies. For example, in service companies, if you have to get an on-site opportunity is where your client is. Now, if your client is Indian, your on-site is also going to be in India. If your client is, let's say, European, then your on-site is going to be in Europe. Also, not everybody gets to go to on-site, right? So there, I mean, it depends on whether you get to go to the on-site and where your client is. In product companies, the first requirement, as I said, is your company should have a presence there. Two is different companies have different criteria of who can apply for internal transfer. For example, some companies would say, hey, look, if you are SD2 or higher, then I would let you take that internal transfer. There is already no problem of hiring junior engineers in those regions. So then you can take an internal transfer. It could also be that the team that you're working with, that team is majorly present in another region. So therefore, they benefit from you coming to that region because then you are more productive. And in that case, you can also apply for internal transfer. Varies from company to company. There is no clear do this and do that, and then like internal transfer will happen. However, I mean, most companies have a designed path to take internal transfer if they have presence in the other country. So it is properly feasible. It is possible to plan for it. So that's one, which is internal transfer. Second is the more direct path, right? Like, can I get hired in a company that is outside of India as well? There you have to look for companies that are direct fit or direct match for what you are currently good in. For example, let's say I'm an engineer who's very good with React.js, Node.js. I've built a bunch of things. I've contributed to so many things on GitHub, open source, and therefore I'm fairly decent with problem solving as well. Now, if I come across a company in Amsterdam or Berlin, and they are looking for somebody who has a very similar persona as I do, then most probably, if you are able to get either a employee referral there, which is you ping somebody on LinkedIn and you ask them or request them to refer you internally, which then has a higher chances of getting an interview, or you apply directly on the career page, that might initiate an interview process, and that might, if you get selected, then you get to go to that particular country. That's the more direct path, which is either you apply directly to the company, or you ping recruiters on LinkedIn, or you ask for referrals from existing employees by again pinging them on LinkedIn mostly. That could get you to the company. So direct path, indirect path, both.
one of the things that I've noticed, talking to my friends and peers, is that the success rate drastically increases if you ping the hiring manager directly. Apart, like recruiters, because they get a lot of messages. If you take an extra step towards finding who's the hiring manager for a particular opening, uh, use that information and ping that hiring manager directly. He'll probably get 30 or 40 messages. Recruiters, on the other hand, might get bombarded with 200 or 300 messages. And always try to make the message crisp and start with why they should hire you, right? Write a personalized message. Don't just drop in your resume and say that, hey, I'm looking for a job, please find suitable openings. Nobody will do that. Go to the career space, find a relevant opening for yourself, and then maybe write a personalized message that will give lot of a better success rate as compared to the other approach.
Right. I've seen a lot of people actually bombard me with templated messages where they even forget to change their company names. That is I can tell you as a person hiring, that is the biggest turnoff. Because then, I mean, if you didn't even take the basic courtesy of doing basic research about the company, then the reciprocation of interest will not happen.
That is true, and if you do a research, that will also give the other person a hint that yes, you have done your actual research and you're actually inclined to join there, right? That is one of the key things that people typically look for. That if they give you an offer, you will join. So that's one indicator I wanted to add. In terms of, so we've talked about how we can apply in terms of, and we have also given a gist about the living expenses and cost expenses. What are the other opportunities that you feel are important to address when people are looking for jobs outside of India, particularly in US or maybe Europe or other regions that we have spoken about?
Right. So jobs in US and universities in US, two different topics. Jobs in US have some upside. Some jobs in US have some upside, not all. One is, I mean, look, I mean, if there's certain kind of work that is happening only in the Silicon Valley right now. For example, if you look at most software systems like Siri or Hey Google, or there's a lot of research work, machine learning work that is happening, that is only happening in Silicon Valley. Probably the same quality of work is not happening in India. And therefore, if you want to be part of that, then you have to be at the center of where all of this is happening, which is the AI labs of most of these companies, right? Your Amazon, Facebook, Apple, companies that deal, Google, that deal with a lot of scale. They are the ones who are doing a lot of cutting edge work there. If you can get there, that's great. So one is that, which is you get access to a lot of quality work in the US. You might not get that here in India. The second thing is obviously, like, if you earn in dollars, if you save in dollars, and if you plan to then return to India eventually, then you might be able to save a lot more in the US than you can in the same period in India. So there is a financial upside as well, which is you'll be saving money in dollars and not in INR. So those are two major upsides for getting a job in the US. Having opportunity to just maybe a higher quality of work in certain fields. It's not generically true that the quality of work in all companies in the US is going to be better, but there are some companies, some fields where this great work is happening. And the second is obviously like earning in dollars.
So you yourself have worked in three regions. You've worked in US, you worked in London, you've worked in India. So what was your experience and your sense of in terms of number of jobs and the ease of getting a job in all the three regions?
Right. I think the number of jobs are highest in US. So the ease of actually finding something in US is I mean, out of the three regions, it's probably easiest to get a job in US. In terms of number of jobs, India comes after US, and probably London comes the last, because London just one city, and probably doesn't have the same number of bustling startups and opportunities that let's say Indian ecosystem does. India actually, just in terms of number of software developers as well, India has a few million software developers. London has a few 100,000 software developers. So there is that just indicates the difference in job ecosystem as well. So yeah, I mean, for the same amount of talent, maybe finding a job in US if your soft skills are better, is easier in the US than in India.
And how about London and India?
London, the number of jobs or maybe the quality of jobs are probably not exactly at par, in the sense that majority of the jobs in London are not for the local ecosystem, because the local ecosystem is still small. They are mostly extension of offices of companies in the US. So a lot of jobs in Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, kind of companies that are actually US based, and then they have a back office in London. And the reality is, the quality of work in headquarter versus a non-headquarter office, there is always a difference there. The current ecosystem of, at least in my understanding, the companies that I got to interact with in London is still not at the same scale as, let's say, the likes of the Flipkarts and the Swiggies and the Zomatos of India yet.
Right.
We, at least in Indian ecosystem, like, these companies have reached a far higher scale than those companies have yet.
I think primarily because of the number of consumers that they have.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
one of the reasons. Yeah. And
like, because of regulation, so software is heavily regulated in all EU countries. So building a consumer product is slightly harder because of regulations. If you put one wrong step and you're in big legal mess. In India, things are a little more wild west. You can do whatever you want.
all right. So, what are the typical risks that one should be aware of if someone is either pursuing a job in US or maybe going for a master's?
So if you're going for masters, and again, like, you're going for masters primarily not because you want to do research, but primarily because you want to get a job in the US. Apart from the risk that I mentioned, which is your opportunity cost, one biggest risk is, what if I don't get a job in the US right after graduating? You actually have a few months of window to find a job in the US once you have graduated from your master's. Post that, you have to return to India. And if you don't, then one big risk is that then you come back to India with a very heavy financial loan on your head, which is not really a good state to be in unless you have your family to support you. So that's one risk. The second risk is that both L1 and H1B visas are sort of temporary in nature, right? For example, you get an H1B visa for 3 years. You can renew for 3 years after that. And then you'll have to apply for a green card before both terms are over. If policies change in between, if you're planning for, let's say, to settle down in the US, if policies change or if something happens, then your long-term plan of settling in the US is in jeopardy. And it's just not a nice feeling being in a country where you might be at risk of being kicked out. So there's that risk as well, that you're dependent on visa regulations, you're dependent on how your visa journey pans out, you're dependent on whether or not you get your green card to actually reside in the US, to actually settle down in the US. So that's another part of the journey. Those two are the major thing. When it comes to job, if you're able to get to a job, then I think the financial piece goes away, but then the visa piece still stays.
Cool. I think that was a really nice, session around, and I hope people who are listening to us.
One other thing that I just want to add.
Yes.
If you're able to find your life partner there who is a citizen, then all of this visa thing goes away. You get a citizenship of the US, and then you can settle in the US.
Yeah, I think there's one more on the similar lines, that if you have a kid in the US, then he is by default, by birth, a US citizen. So if people want US citizenship for their kids, they can plan a kid in the US. But I think that's there only for US. Singapore and UK does not have that. All right. Thank you so much for the session. Now we'll go to the questions. There are a lot of good questions in the comment box. Cool.
So the first question that I can read on my screen is it worth taking on the huge student loan debt for my master's if I'm working in a service-based company in India? As I said, Ritvik, it is very personal. So therefore I said, like, maybe if I was in your shoes, where I come from a middle-class family. So I can't rely on my parents to give me a $200,000 check. If that is the case, then at least what I would try first is there a way I can create a path for myself to learn the right things and be able to make a switch to a great company within India itself. And then once I have a great employer brand to back me, then that does two things. One is it increases my probability of getting into even a better college in the US. It also helps me to like figure out a path if there is a path to get an internal transfer to the US. So I would say like if your purpose is to get to the US, then this would not be my first path, first V0 answer. This would be my backup answer. My first choice answer would be, can I figure out a path to get to great companies by learning the right things, and what those right things are.
So, any sense, maybe a short answer on that as well, since you spoke about skills, learning the right skills as well. So, any suggestions that you want to give to the listeners that, hey, this is how you can learn those skills?
Right. So, look, I mean, if I just map down what most good product companies look for, so they look for great problem solving skills, data structures, algorithms, system design. There are a bunch of free resources to learn that as well. If you want to do it in a more disciplined setup with other people with regular classes, then Scalar Academy does that. I cannot recommend Scalar Academy enough. I have seen so many journeys. I probably would not have the same confidence 6 months back or a year back. I've seen so many journeys now that I can personally vouch for the Scalar Academy program. That being said, there are websites like InterviewBit, LeetCode, where you can practice data structures algorithms for free. You go ahead, check them out, try solving problems there to understand where you stand today. There are certain materials on system design. I mean, for example, you'll find a bunch of videos on YouTube. There is a course on educative.io which talks about system design. Please go read that. There are again a bunch of resources on low-level design or design patterns. So again, if you try searching on the internet, you'll find some free resources lying around. Go and research that and try to build a good side project on the side, which again looks good on your resume. If you can do that, then there is a path to get to great companies. If you're confused, come to Scalar Academy. Scalar Academy has all of this.
Lovely. Cool. Thank you so much for that. Let's take the next question, which is by Shreyash Kulkarni. Over to you.
Person with 2 years of experience and person with MS degree, whom would companies prefer? Do companies see degree or actual hands-on experience or combination of both? So your experience decides which level you get hired at. If for example, if I have 4 years of experience, I might get hired as an SD2 at Amazon. Your degree actually is just helps ease out getting to the interview part. For example, let's say if I graduated from Stanford, I can then go and apply to a Facebook or a Google or an Apple, any company I want, and most probably I'll get back an interview call. However, my degree will not help me crack that interview. My degree will not increase my probability of getting the offer. And my degree will certainly not dictate if I get hired as SD2. I'll only be hired as SD1. So in fact, Mohit was giving me an example of a friend who was an SD2 at Amazon. He left the job, did masters from the US, and then got hired as SD1 in Amazon. So I mean, your degree is not indicative of your designation. Without the degree, to be honest, like the hardest step of getting the interview, cracking the interview, and actually then getting promoted, the hardest step is either getting promoted and performing well in the job or actually doing well in the interview. And to be honest, what you learn matters more. So degree degree does not matter. What you learn matters more. So I mean, I would say like think about what helps me learn most, because the hardest steps are those, and then optimize for that.
Couldn't agree more. I by degree, I'm not a software engineer or a computer science engineer. My degree is I did a BTech in electrical and electronics, and I'm doing fairly well. So I think the skills that Anshuman is mentioning does matter a lot, right? So focus on the skills. Degree is just a piece of paper which will fill your eligibility criteria for a particular job.
I'll take one more example here. So there's a company called Gojek. Gojek is such a huge company that right now they're merging with Tokopedia, and they make up for like 2 to 3% of the GDP of Indonesia. They are that big. They have a team in India as well. The CTO of Gojek, the person who actually heads all of the tech team, at Gojek. He's now just left very recently, but that person was a finance person by background, had no relevance to engineering, had no relevance to coding at all. That person learned coding on their own, and then now they became the CTO of Gojek, right? So skills matter just a lot more than you can imagine. Without the degree, without the pedigree, maybe you'll face temporary challenges, but eventually they'll sort themselves out.
Yeah, I think for the research profile you were mentioning, right? That research profile, you can do research in the companies and then get, maybe if you can touch upon that example.
Sure, absolutely. Even for the research bit, one of the other misconceptions I've heard from people is that the only way to do research is actually go to a university and do a MS by research or master's or PhD from there. That is also not true. I have had my friends who were my roommates in the US. They were at a very similar path. And one of them is currently designing the newsfeed ranking algorithm for Instagram. One of them is currently working with Oculus VR. In their day-to-day life, they get to do a lot more of this research thinking and quick implementation and measuring the results than they could have ever done it at a university. Google has their scholar engineers, Jeff Dean, Sanjay Gumawat, etc., who built out the Google search algorithm, which today billions of people use. I sincerely doubt, without the access to that level of traffic, that level of data, they would have been able to do that. And that was only possible actually working in a real live setup, having access to that information. So a lot of good research work happens at companies as well. So don't discount that. In fact, like I would say, the best research agencies today are the AI labs at the big 5, big 6 companies in the world. They're better than most other universities that are out there. No questions at all.
Right. Let's go to our next question, which is by Sai. He says, is doing masters online worth it? There are many platforms which are offering masters from other platforms. I think Coursera also offers by Rice University and all that. So doing masters from online universities, maybe foreign universities, is it worth it or is it not worth it?
So in my opinion, the online degree that you get, the MS that you get, doesn't have a lot of value. What again has a lot of value is what you end achieving as part of your learning as a result of that course. So the fact that you have an online MS from, let's say, Arizona State University, that will not have a lot of implication to the outcome of where you work. What will have a lot of implication to where you work is what did you learn in the process. And it will probably not right for me to comment on the quality and the learning piece yet. I haven't done those courses. I have met a few people who have, but in my understanding, not a lot of people have very life-changing outcomes after doing these online MS degrees yet. There's still pieces to be filled in those degrees, in those courses.
And I think one of the benefit that people typically do masters for is that they open up the US market. Online MS will not open up US market. You will not get a F1 visa, and hence you will have to go through the same route of H1B or an L1 visa. So from a job perspective also, it does not make sense. You'll still be getting the jobs that are available in India. Cool. This is interesting. So which countries compared to the US in terms of opportunities for IT employees holding 3 to 4 years of experience?
Right. So actually, to say opportunities for IT employees has two implications. One is, what is the earning opportunity, which is like how much can I earn and where can I earn the most. The other is what is the kind of ecosystem that exists there, which gives me a lot of options, and therefore I have a lot of option of really, really high quality work. I can keep moving around and keep doing really high quality work. In comparison to US, when it comes to the pay scale, I think pay scale wise, countries like, or cities like Zurich, etc., are fairly high on the pay scale, and therefore, for example, Google Zurich pays almost the same amount or even slightly higher than what they pay in their US office. When it comes to the cash component, the stock component is slightly lower. But the
London as well, I guess.
London as well, yes. London as well is high on the pay scale bit.
Right.
However, it's a very expensive city. But, but it is very high on the pay scale. I think in terms of the ecosystem of companies that exist and like cutting edge work happening, compared to US, there is a lot of really cutting edge work actually happening in Israel, but it's very hard to go to Israel. But Israel actually is the country where a lot of very high tech companies emerged from. So a lot of high tech work happening there. India is actually not so bad at all. I mean, compared to the US ecosystem, like some of the top companies in India are doing great work as well, especially because of the scale that India sees. So that just gives a lot of opportunities. China has done a great work in IT, but again, China is not very foreigner friendly. So as Indians, we don't actually have an option to go and work in China mostly. And then there is the London ecosystem, or the Amsterdam ecosystem, or Singapore ecosystem, or the Australian ecosystem. But those are still, I mean, emerging economies. There is, to be honest, like there is a battle ongoing right now for the secondary Silicon Valley. We'll see which one emerges out to become the secondary Silicon Valley.
I think Israel is there are many security companies that are emerging out of Israel, and
Right.
there are many in terms of scale. I think Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, especially I think because of the Gojek, right? So they are also picking up.
Right. I think the revolution in Southeast Asia is primarily driven by the competition between Grab, Gojek, Tokopedia, Traveloka, etc. They've grown to become multi-billion-dollar companies, and they just have been fighting for talent. So that's led to a surge in the competition there. But still not at all at the same scale as India is.
Yeah.
India is.
This is for people who just want to go out of India and maybe experience a different lifestyle.
Right. Yeah, Indonesia is not a bad option at all.
Cool. He's basically a 4-year experienced candidate working in a pretty decent company. Goal is to move outside India. If you can just maybe in a concise way paint a roadmap for people that these are the step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right. If you have more than 4-year experience and you're working in a pretty decent company, pretty decent product company, then to be honest, like your the path for you is much easier. I'll give you certain examples. So example number 1 is you apply directly to companies. So a lot of companies, I mean, so if you have more than 4 years of experience, even cities like Zurich open up. Singapore would actually wants you. So getting into a company in Singapore is far easier. So if you figure out, again, job opportunities that are relevant for you, are able to apply to those, most probably companies would be very happy to welcome you. The second path is like if your pretty decent product company has presence in countries outside of India, then maybe figure out what is the path to take an internal transfer. A lot of companies are actually open for that. For example, an Amazon or a Microsoft would say that, look, if you're an SD2, if you get promoted, then you can apply to various teams outside. And if those teams accept, then you do a very minor interview and then you take the transfer.
Next question is about Puneet, who's basically asking does the designation, I think he's calling it on-site opportunities, but how does the designation play a role in getting an on-site opportunity?
Right. Actually, so most, I would not say so the dynamics of getting on-site in a service company is very different from, again, like dynamics of getting directly to a job or taking an internal transfer in a product company. If I address the latter, which is how do I go directly to a company in a country that is outside of India, there the higher years of experience you have, the higher designation you have, the better the quality of work you've done, the higher your probability. For example, there are some companies that pose restriction on years of experience when it comes to work visa. For example, as I said, like Singapore, if you have less than 2 years of experience, it is significantly harder to get a work visa. or Zurich or Switzerland does not even issue a work visa if you have less than 4 years of experience. However, as your years of experiences increase, there like companies are like countries are more open to have you, and therefore companies are also more open to have you. When it comes to service companies, I think they're like being able to get to on-site or not. That dynamic probably I'm not the best person to answer because I haven't gone through that dynamic myself. Uh, it's a lot to do with where your client is, what kind of people do they need on site, and then how good of a terms are you with your manager. Maybe your manager actually sends you on site, doesn't send you on site based on various parameters.
Next question is quite interesting. So, competitive programming websites like Codeforces or CodeChef ratings doesn't matter in US or Canada. Since it's I'll break this question into two parts. One, if he's applying for the online universities, probably for a master's, and then we'll talk about the job outcomes as well.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, if you're applying for a master's, then probably the CodeChef or Codeforces rating don't matter at all. They don't index on that. They would rather index on what you have done in the past. Could be things that you have gone ahead and done on your own. For example, if you were working in a decent company, that increases your chances a lot more to get good scholarship. So CodeChef, Codeforces rating maybe not so much for masters. For jobs, again, I mean, look, I mean, some companies, if you're applying from India directly to a job in US, Canada, and if you don't have a lot of experience, chances are you'll not get shortlisted. Because I mean, for a recruiter in USA, they know that even if they hire you, even if you're a gem of a person, gem of an engineer, finding a H-1B visa for you is significantly hard. So they won't take the chance primarily for that reason. Even when it comes to Canada, if you're applying directly to a company without any employee referral, etc., there also, I mean, like taking a chance on you amongst that big noise of people applying it's very, very hard. The best chances when you're applying to a country outside of India, apart from any of the ratings or the projects, etc., you've done, is finding a connect who can help refer you. As Mohit said, if you can send a very personalized message to the hiring manager explaining why you are most relevant for the role, why there is nobody better than you, that might be more effective than just showcasing your Codeforces or CodeChef rating.
This question is about Scalar Academy. He is asking if there is a version of Scalar Academy which can be done in 3 months or less. Primarily interested in DS Algo.
Understood. So I mean, in Scalar Academy, the DS Algo portion, it gets over in 3 months actually. And like they're basically modules, right? So you have DS Algo, then there is CS fundamentals, then there is low-level design, then there is high-level design, and then there are projects. The DS Algo piece gets over in the first 3 months. That being said, I mean, to be honest, I have never encountered a person in Scalar Academy who says that the course is going slow. Everybody comes back and says that this is very overwhelming. It's very hard to manage along with jobs. It's just, can I pause the course? We have a pause feature as well where you can pause the course for 4 weeks just to catch up. We rarely encounter people who say that the course is going slow because it's fairly rigorous. So for those 3 months, to be honest, you'll find that you have nothing else to do. You're just focusing on this and this alone. If DSA is the only focus, DSA will be done in 3 months.
So this question is by Anshuman Sharma. He says that I'm working with a product-based company and I'm quite happy with the role in learning. Would it be wise to go to London as a dependent of my wife and find the job there? He's confused.
Right. Depends on, I mean, what I would say is instead of going to London, maybe apply for a few jobs in London from here and try to see what kind of opportunities open up. If you get an offer from a great company, great. If you are already in a company that has presence in London, maybe request your current company to give you an internal transfer. At least talk to your manager. What is the path to get internal transfer to London? London is not a bad place at all. I mean, the software ecosystem is still great there. I mean, it probably isn't as vibrant as the Indian ecosystem today, but it still is great there. I mean, you can't go wrong with London. If you can find, however, I would say that don't compromise with the quality of company and quality of work when you move to London. So therefore, I said either internal transfer or maybe start applying to companies, have a job offer, and then move.
So we'll take this question. So he's basically asking for any Asian country apart from India where he can do MTech. So we have only covered, I think, masters only in the US. There
In
are
the
other
US.
countries as well. So is it wise to do masters from maybe EU region or Australia or Singapore?
Right. I think he's asking among the Asian countries. I think among the Asian countries, Singapore, uh, um, NUS is actually National University of Singapore is actually good. So in Singapore, if you do a master's, you can do that. However, I think one of the things that the Singapore government does is they offer a very large scholarship on the fees, and in turn ask you to stay back in Singapore for at least 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and do a job in Singapore. If you're okay with that, I mean, a lot of colleges in Singapore are really great. So I would recommend doing a master's from Singapore. Um, Outside of Singapore, most other Asian countries, for example, if I look at Southeast Asia, they are not they're not at the same stage yet. For example, India still has IITs and BITS. There is no equivalent of an IIT or a BITS in either Indonesia or Vietnam or Philippines. India probably has a few colleges that are much better as compared to the other Southeast Asian countries, except for Singapore.
So he's basically asking, can passing an interview is basically passing an interview in farm company versus competitive programming. Which one is harder?
So I have heard very different definitions of competitive programming. I'll tell you what competitive programming means to me. Um, and then we did a programming camp 10 years back when I was graduating to train people for ACM ICPC competition. And there we had prepared a curriculum, and that curriculum was came with the assumption that, hey, look, you're already good with data structures algorithm. I give you on basic concepts. If I give you a problem, you'll be able to solve it. Then what else is required to be actually good at competitive programming? And there you had within graphs, like how do you find network flows, min cut, articulation point bridges. Very similarly, like there's a big section on computational geometry. Where again convex hull is just the starting point. There's just so much to be done within computational geometry as well. Bunch of again more advanced algorithm on advanced graph, advanced strings, etc., which we probably never touch in data structures algorithm. That to me is competitive programming. There, like getting questions around that and being able to solve that is competitive programming. What we solve today, which are just typical problems from binary search, trees, etc., that you find on lead code or interview bit, that's not competitive programming. And to be honest, like to be able to crack interviews of most FANG companies, Google is an exception. But when it comes to Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Adobe, etc., you don't need to know even the C of competitive programming, in my definition. You only need to be good with data structures and algorithm, which means not just like knowing that this data structure exists, being able to like given a random problem, being able to identify that, hey, look, maybe a tree works really good here. Let me apply tree in this problem. Uh, if you've done that, then you should be able to easily crack an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Adobe interview. Google is slightly harder than the other counterparts. And there for there maybe you need to do a little bit of competitive programming.
Makes sense. Let's take our last question now. We've almost answered most of the questions that were asked. He's asking whether the headquarters of Amazon, Microsoft, and big tech companies in India are doing as good work as their US counterparts.
Right. So again, the answer differs from company to company. By the way, there's still. I mean, the answer is yes, maybe for some companies, no, maybe for other companies. I'll tell you what the answer was 10 years back. 10 years back, for all of these companies, the Indian counterparts were doing much, maybe not so good work as compared to their US counterparts. India was considered as the back office, was not the primary market for any of these companies, and therefore, like a lot of support work would come to India. A lot of support projects, maybe non-core projects, would come to India. However, that has changed very rapidly in the last 10 years or so, primarily because for some of these companies, India has become a prime market. For example, if you look at Google, Google has launched Google Pay in India. Google is building products for India and India alone. And therefore, like teams in India are driving that. Or for example, if you look at Amazon, Amazon is also building for the Indian market now, and therefore, like some of the projects are driven from here, and therefore the quality of work is slightly higher. So the answer, if you had asked me this question maybe 8-10 years back, the answer would be yes. None of the Indian companies, none of the Indian headquarters are doing the same quality of work as the US headquarters. The answer today is yes for some, no for some. However, there's one field where there is cutting edge AI ML work happening. That's probably not happening at the same scale as it's happening in the US. A lot of the AI labs of companies, they have whole and sole presence in the US, and they haven't extended that to India yet.
Any AI companies, out of curiosity, I'm asking, any AI or ML companies that you know in India are doing great work?
I I don't know. Maybe there are, but I don't know for sure. When it comes to look, one of the prerequisites of doing very very cutting edge machine learning work is that you should have access to huge abundance of data, which probably others don't. And because that gives you the edge that, hey, look, I have access to this information. I can now do cutting edge work and build things which maybe others might not be able to. There are a bunch of companies in India that have access to that kind of information. For example, I'm sure like ShareChat would generate tons of data. Zomato, Swiggy would generate tons of data. Flipkart would generate tons of data. A lot of companies on the B2C sites are working at very, very high scale, and therefore they have access to that data. What they are doing with that data and what is that resulting in, that I don't have visibility to yet. Right? We still have to see something very cutting edge come from any of these companies. So therefore, I'm not sure,
Right.
and I don't know.
All right. This LinkedIn user is basically asking this question. I think it's relevant for, uh, you know, uh, the times that we are living in. Will work
Right.
from home be continued long time to go for an abroad opportunity? So have you heard about anyone who's basically shifted to a different region in these times?
Right. So, in fact, there is a Scalar student. He got a job offer with a company in Germany, which was a company in the field of finance. Um, and this job offer came exactly around the COVID time, the first wave of COVID, and they held back the job offer for some time because of the ongoing pandemic. They rolled out the offer around July, August, and told the person that, hey, look, you can work from home till this pandemic is going on, and once this is over, we'll get your visa done, and then you can come. Fortunately, he was able to move to Germany November, December last year, when the COVID wave was,
Second.
second wave had not occurred, and the first wave was almost on the way down. However, if you're till the pandemic is going on, and there is almost zero scope to get you moved over, some companies are reluctant to hire. Some companies are open to hire. Some companies, for example, have the philosophy that the future of the world is going to be remote, and therefore they'll hire remote. Some companies are still not at terms with that, and therefore they want some local presence.
I think that has opened up a market globally also. Right. Many of the US companies are opening up remote work. I think Airbnb, if I'm not wrong, somebody told me that Airbnb specifically, they don't have an office in India. Still, they are looking for developers who can work directly from India. And because of that, the pay scale also, just to maintain a parity across all the locations, the pay scale of Indian developers is basically increasing. And then there are FAANG companies as well, which are actually hiring. Facebook London is hiring, for example. So uh, there are still companies which are hiring, where you can still apply and go. But as you said, the number of companies and number of options have reduced.
Right. There are another class of companies though that are willing to hire people from India, almost on a semi-freelancing, semi-job kind of a setup. Right. Like for example, there is a website called Turing.com that hires a lot of remote developers for US companies, especially companies that can't afford to hire developers in the US themselves. So there again, you'll see that there is a lot of cost arbitrage, and therefore you get paid much higher for those kind of options. Um,
Right.
that is still evolving, however, very, very early stages.
So this is the last question. Does testing has too good offer comparable to development?
I think the question is like, does testing have a long term, have the same kind of long term horizon as development jobs do? Um, Testing also, by the way, gets categorized into two parts. One is what is called as manual testing, QA jobs, which are heavy on manual testing, and then some bit of automation testing. And then there are jobs which are SDET, software development engineer in test. SDETs are very close to development jobs because you're actually always writing code. You're building these infrastructure slash frameworks for tests to happen. So you're actually a developer. It's just that you're not doing application. You're not building applications. You're building something else. So there, I would say the long term horizon is similar, and it doesn't really affect. It's just that like the number of opportunities on very high leadership levels are probably lesser as compared to development. So therefore, a lot of people tend to move from SDET to SD jobs early on in the career or mid level of the career. QA gets capped after some point of time, right? Because the growth happens as a manager or managing very huge teams. In the individual contribution capacity, IC capacity, a QA role gets capped on the pay scale that you get. Developer would probably grow at a much faster pace with respect to pay scale. A QA would grow much slower. So if you're a QA, if you are an ambitious person, probably look to switch to an SDET role and then slowly to an SD role if possible, or maybe learn on your own time and then apply for SD jobs. That probably is a better decision. SDETs have similar kind of horizon as SDs do.
If you have any suggestions or doubts, please comment on this particular video. What topic you want us to talk about. Thank you so much, guys. Anshuman, if you want to say any last word, I'll leave that to you.
Right. I think in conclusion, all I would want to say is that a lot of our current behaviors are created by what the masses are doing. One of the reasons, masters in US got popular for the wrong reason. The reason being that it is a gateway for jobs in the US. It is important to take a step back and see whether that makes sense for you, because you're not what the masses are, right? So there are multiple paths. You draw out your own chart, you draw out your own journey, and there is no expiry limit. Be open to experimentation, be open to learning. Something or the other might turn up. You'll still end up maybe with a better path than others have taken, right? So that would be my concluding statement.